They erased me from my father's will while he was sedated. Not a rumor, not a suggestion. A signed document pushed across a conference table while he was barely awake from a medical procedure. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I built a case. And what I found didn't just change my family, it changed how I understand forgiveness. My father was 75 when it started. Not frail, just slower. Coffee at 6:30, crosswords, a walk after lunch. Receipts filed into envelopes by year 1999, 2004, 2017. He believed in order and fairness. He'd told me more than once that his estate house, savings, modest investments would be split evenly between me and my half-sister Claire. We weren't enemies, but we weren't close. She gravitated to Dad's second wife. I helped Dad with errands and yard work. Still, I believed we both respected his wishes. Or maybe I needed to believe that. The first crack came as a phone call. Dad had just had a routine heart procedure with sedation. When I checked in that evening, he sounded foggy, words sliding around each other. I chalked it up to medication. A few days later, he mentioned, casually, Claire took me to sign some papers. He didn't know what the papers were. That sentence wouldn't leave me alone. I called Claire. Routine updates, she said. Dad wanted to simplify things. Her voice was too tight, the kind of tight you hear when someone already knows they've crossed a line. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived, an amendment notice from Dad's lawyer. It said my share had been reassigned. Claire was now the sole heir. No explanation, just black ink, white paper, and my name missing. I brought the letter to Dad. Do you remember changing your will? I asked. He frowned. It's always been 50-50. That's fair. When I showed him the amendment, his hands shook. I never meant that. I don't even remember this. That moment turned shock into action. I met with an attorney who explained the two words my family was about to learn the hard way: capacity and undue influence. In plain English, capacity means you understand what you're signing and what it does. Undue influence means someone pressured or manipulated you into signing. Sedation clouds capacity and opens the door to undue influence. Probate, by the way, is the court that makes sure a will or its changes are valid. The paper chase began. I ordered Dad's medical records for the procedure day. They listed the sedative, dosage, and discharge time. I pulled the appointment log from his calendar. Of course, he had one. I checked his receipts. He had written the exact time the parking garage ticket was validated. The times lined up too neatly. Discharge from the clinic, then a signature at a law office not long after. Next, I called the law office. The paralegal remembered that day. He seemed tired, she said carefully. I asked if he was alone. No, his daughter brought him. She hesitated, then added, I felt uneasy about it. That was the first break. A witness. Uneasiness. Not proof by itself, but a breadcrumb. I filed a petition in probate court to contest the amendment. People think notarization is a magic shield. It isn't. A notary verifies identity, not mental clarity. If the signer lacks capacity, that stamp is decorative. Claire was silent at first. When she finally texted, it was short. You're making this ugly. I didn't reply. I was done debating feelings. I was building facts. Preparing for the hearing turned my life into binders and tabs. My attorney and I mapped a straight line through the afternoon Claire had orchestrated. Hospital sedation, groggy release, law office signature, sole heir amendment. If a judge could see that path clearly, the paper would start to talk back. Then came a second break. The paralegal had kept her own notes. Nothing dramatic, just routine lines about who was present and the signer's condition. One phrase mattered. Client appeared fatigued. Daughter assisting. In a hospital room, fatigued is nothing. In a law office attached to a will change, it's a flare. Claire hired counsel. Their position was simple. Dad always intended to leave the estate to the child who cared for him most. But Dad had always said 50-50, and he still said it. Intent isn't what someone claims. You felt intent is what you can prove, especially when you're sober, alert, and not half asleep from a sedative. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom was cold enough to keep produce fresh. The judge wore a neat gray bun and an expression that said she'd seen every form of family weather. We raised our right hands. We sat, and the paper war began. My attorney went first. Medical record, dosage, discharge time, calendar entry, parking receipt, timestamp, Law office sign-in sheet. Paralegal note. Brick, brick, brick. The judge turned to Claire. Did your father understand what he was signing that day? Claire looked at the table. Her attorney objected to the phrasing. The judge sustained, rephrased, and asked again. Were you confident he understood the document? Claire managed. He wanted to simplify. It hung in the air like steam. Then it was my turn. I spoke slowly. I said Dad had told me for years his will was equal. I said he told me the same thing after the amendment, still believing that's what his will said. I handed over copies of Dad's old emails to me and Claire where he'd written, "It's fair both of you share equally." Plain English, from a clear mind, written long before any sedative. Our final exhibit was the simplest. A line from Dad's discharge instructions. Avoid legal or financial decisions for 24 hours. You can argue about intent. You can't argue with a clock. When the judge ruled, it was brief. The amendment, she said, was invalid due to lack of capacity at the time of signing and the circumstances suggesting undue influence. The original will was reinstated, 50-50. The relief was so sudden, I realized I'd been breathing shallows for months. That could have been the end of the story, a clean moral about fairness and vigilance. But the hardest part came after. A week later, Dad asked me and Claire to come over. He was tired of the Cold War in his living room. We sat at the old kitchen table with 3 mugs of tea that went cold, untouched. Claire spoke first. I was scared, she said. I thought you'd get more. I thought Dad trusted you more. I panicked. She kept her eyes on the lip of her cup, like the answer might be inked there. Then it was my turn. I spoke slowly. I said Dad had told me for years his will was equal. I said he told me the same thing after the amendment, still believing that's what his will said. I handed over copies of Dad's old emails to me and Claire where he'd written, "It's fair both of you share equally." Plain English, from a clear mind, written long before any sedative. Our final exhibit was the simplest. A line from Dad's discharge instructions. Avoid legal or financial decisions for 24 hours. You can argue about intent. You can't argue with a clock. When the judge ruled, it was brief. The amendment, she said, was invalid due to lack of capacity at the time of signing and the circumstances suggesting undue influence. The original will was reinstated, 50-50. The relief was so sudden, I realized I'd been breathing shallows for months. That could have been the end of the story, a clean moral about fairness and vigilance. But the hardest part came after. A week later, Dad asked me and Claire to come over. He was tired of the Cold War in his living room. We sat at the old kitchen table with 3 mugs of tea that went cold, untouched. Claire spoke first. I was scared, she said. I thought you'd get more. I thought Dad trusted you more. I panicked. She kept her eyes on the lip of her cup, like the answer might be inked there. Her words didn't excuse anything. They didn't erase the nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if my own sister saw me as a problem she needed to solve. But they did something else. They made her human again, not a villain, a frightened person who made a serious, damaging choice. I told her I forgave her, not because she earned it, and not because I'm noble. I did it because carrying that anger felt like drinking poison and hoping she'd get sick. Forgiveness wasn't a favor to her. It was a release valve for me. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting. It is not the same as trusting. The guardrails went up immediately. We hired a neutral third party, a licensed fiduciary, to monitor Dad's bills and keep a ledger anyone could see. We agreed that any future legal documents would be reviewed by Dad's independent attorney, not a lawyer chosen by either child. And we set a simple rule that would have prevented this mess. No signings within 48 hours of sedation or anesthesia. If a doctor says, "Take it easy," that includes your signature. The new routine held. Dad relaxed. We stopped treating the mailbox like a crime scene. When he eventually passed, the estate moved through probate on a calm river. Equal shares, just like he wanted, just like he'd said in those emails, just like he'd always told us when he was himself. I wish I could say Claire and I became close after that. We didn't. We became civil. We could talk logistics without drawing blood. We could share a room without letting the past take all the oxygen. That's not a storybook ending, but it's an honest one. What did I learn? First, paper is powerful. A few signatures can change the course of a family, for good or ill. Second, a clear mind matters. If someone can't tell you in their own words what a document does and who it affects, Wait. Third, forgiveness is self-care. It doesn't wipe the slate clean. It lets you stop scrubbing a stain that won't come out. If you're walking into something like this, here's the plain English map I wish someone had handed me. Capacity. The person signing must understand what the paper does and who it affects. Sedation, delirium, or confusion can knock this out. If capacity is shaky, don't sign. Undue influence. Pressure, isolation, or manipulation during a signing can void a document. If a single relative is orchestrating the whole event date, transport, lawyer slow everything down, probate, the court that decides if a will or change to a will is valid. It's not fast, but it exists to stop exactly what happened to us. Notaries, they confirm identity, not judgment. A stamp doesn't mean the signer was clear-headed. In the end, I chose to protect my father's intent, protect myself, and then protect my peace. I got the will restored, I put guardrails in place, and I put down a weight I didn't want to carry anymore. Forgiveness didn't make us friends. It made me free. There was another twist I haven't spoken about often because it tested the boundaries of trust in ways I couldn't have predicted. After the court ruling, when the dust was supposed to be settling, my father's neighbor Mrs. Alvarez came over with a concerned look. Mrs. Alvarez was the kind of neighbor who brought soup when you were sick and peeked through her curtains at everyone's comings and goings. "Your father mentioned something to me," she said. "Claire asked him about his deed last month." His deed. The paper that says who owns the house. "What about it?" I asked. Mrs. Alvarez shrugged, worry in her eyes. She wanted him to sign it over. My heart raced. The will was one thing. The deed to the house was the biggest piece of his estate. I went straight to Dad. "Did you sign anything else?" He looked confused, almost embarrassed. "Claire said it was for taxes," he said. "I didn't want to bother you." We tore through his files. The house deed was still in his name, thank heaven. But there was a document, an attempted quit-claim deed that Claire had drafted but never filed. It would have transferred the house to her alone. She had typed it up, but Dad never signed it. He told her he needed to check with me. That pause saved us. We confronted Claire again. "I was just trying to avoid probate," she insisted, but by then the pattern was clear. When desperation mixes with the complexity of property law, people make decisions that cross lines. It was another micro-reveal that deepened my resolve to keep everything transparent. We added the house to the neutral fiduciary's oversight. We placed a note on the title requiring both our signatures for any changes. It was another twist and another boundary, but it also made me wonder how many families lose property because someone doesn't ask. Is this normal? At every turn, there seemed to be another layer. While I focused on the legal battle, Claire had been telling the wider family a different story. "My cousin Jenna called me, her voice cold. 'I heard you're trying to steal everything.' My chest tightened. The narrative had been flipped. I was the greedy one, Claire, the dutiful daughter just trying to honor Dad's wishes. Lies spread faster than truth, especially when they confirm people's fears about money and family. Instead of blasting back, I invited Jenna and our aunt to look at the paperwork. We sat down and I walked them through the timeline, the sedation, the paralegal's note, the discharge instructions. It was awkward. They kept glancing at each other, but by the end, they nodded. "I didn't know that," Jenna said quietly. That day taught me something else. Transparency is a shield against gossip. It also taught me how easily narratives can harden into judgments when you're not around to correct them. When I was 6 years old, my father taught me to tie my shoes by making me practice on his boots. Those laces were thick and clumsy, but he wanted me to learn patience. As I sat in court decades later, waiting for a judge to decide whether my father had been exploited, I thought about those boots. Life's lessons don't announce themselves. They hide in mundane tasks, like tying shoes and sorting receipts. Dad's insistence on documentation, on order, on fairness. It wasn't just a quirk, it was a life raft in the middle of a storm. It didn't stop there. A month after Dad's passing, as we were cleaning out his house, I found a shoebox under his bed. Inside were handwritten letters from my grandfather to him. "Remember, fairness is not about splitting things evenly," one letter read. "It's about living so that your conscience doesn't whisper at night." Those words hit me like a wave. Dad hadn't just preached equality, he'd inherited it. The letters also contained stories of disputes in the family I'd never heard about. Land lost because a will was taxes ignored, siblings estranged because of a horse sold without permission. Suddenly, I saw my father's caution in context. He'd already seen what happened when people turn a blind eye to documents. Another twist came when I looked at Claire's own life more closely. She had lost her job 6 months before the heart procedure. A small business she'd invested in had failed. She was behind on her mortgage. Did that excuse her actions? No, but it added a dimension. Desperation has a way of shrinking morality. It's not a justification, it's a context. Understanding it softened my anger without obliterating my boundaries. I also learned that we weren't the only family in court that month arguing about wills. One day, while waiting for my case to be called, I overheard a grandmother crying because her grandson had convinced her to sign a power of attorney, then drained her account. Another case involved siblings fighting over whether a handwritten note constituted a codicil to a will. In the hallway, lawyers swapped war stories. I realized we were part of a larger tapestry of families navigating love and money, trust, and betrayal. It made me feel less alone and more convinced that we need plain language resources for this stuff. Probate, for all its slowness, is designed to protect people. I used to think it was just red tape, but those hours reading statutes and hearing cases gave me respect for the system. Still, laws can only go so far. They can't mend relationships. They can't erase the things said in anger. They can't restore trust. They can only enforce fairness on paper. During the months of legal wrangling, I had nightmares. In one, I was walking through a maze of manila folders that kept shifting. Every time I thought I'd reached the center, the walls moved, and I was back in front of Claire. In another, Dad sat in a chair across from me, silent as I tried to hand him documents that turned into sand. Sleep wasn't a refuge. It was another courtroom. It wasn't until after I forgave Claire and we put structures in place that the nightmares eased. It's funny, legal battles happen in daylight, but the emotional fallout plays out at 3 a.m. I started seeing a therapist halfway through the process. I didn't think I needed to. I'm strong, I told myself. But the therapist pointed out that betrayal is trauma, and trauma doesn't just fade because a judge ruled in your favor. We worked on boundaries, on grieving the sister I thought I had, on allowing myself to be angry without being consumed by it. Therapy gave me language for what I was feeling. It also kept me from turning into a legal bulldozer, flattening everything in my path. I wish I could say that after the court decision, Claire and I never fought again. That would be a lie. There were flare-ups when settling Dad's bills. There was tension when deciding what to do with his car. There were passive-aggressive texts and clipped phone calls. But there was also this. We never went back to court. We honored the guardrails. We never again tried to change a document without the other's knowledge. That, for us, was progress. There's a scene I replay sometimes. It's the day we buried Dad. The sky was a hard blue, the kind that makes your eyes hurt. Claire and I stood next to each other, our shoulders almost touching. She whispered, "I'm sorry for all of it." For once, it didn't feel like words said to placate. It felt like something real. I nodded. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't. I just said thank you. And in that small exchange, there was a kind of quiet understanding that isn't on paper but is just as binding. Years later, when I told this story to my own children carefully, in pieces I focused less on the betrayal and more on the lessons. People can do hurtful things when they're scared, I said, and you don't have to hold on to that hurt forever. I also told them to write things down, to talk to each other, to trust but verify, and to never sign anything if they're not fully awake. The protect yourself tip, the one I'd wish for anyone sitting at a kitchen table with a parent's legal documents, goes like this. Never sign important documents for an aging relative without an independent witness and a few clear safeguards. Use a neutral lawyer, ask questions, and wait at least a day after any sedation. If someone insists on rushing, that's a red flag. Slowing down isn't disrespect, it's protection. This story isn't just about a will, it's about the delicate dance between trust and vigilance, love and law. It's about learning that fairness is sometimes enforced by courts, but lived through choices. It's about the families we're given and the boundaries we must build. It's about the power of forgiveness to free you, even when the person you're forgiving hasn't fully earned it. And if there's a moral, it's this. Paper doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about signatures and dates. Make sure the mind behind the hand is clear, the witness is neutral, and the process is transparent. Everything else, feelings, history, sibling rivalry, matters immensely, but it won't hold up in court. Only documentation will. So honor your feelings by being diligent with your paperwork. Protect your family by asking hard questions. And protect your heart by remembering that forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not to absolve others. In the end, my father's will was restored. His house went to Claire and me in equal measure. His savings were split evenly. His grave sits under a maple tree, and sometimes Claire and I visit at the same time. We nod, we place flowers, we stand in silence. We are not friends, but we are no longer enemies. We are something else, survivors of our own story, bound by blood and by a signature that was signed correctly at the right time with the right minds present. And that, for me, is enough. There was, unbelievably, yet another twist after we thought the deed issue was the last of the surprises. A call came from a credit card company asking about my father's application for a new line of credit. I frowned into the phone. My father hadn't applied for any credit. He already had a small card he used for groceries, and only because I insisted it built his credit history. The representative read back the information on the application. Some of it was correct. His name, his address. Some of it was slightly off, like a relative who doesn't know you well would guess. His middle initial was wrong. His income was exaggerated. Whoever filled out the form had been close enough to his personal details to make it seem legitimate, but sloppy enough to raise red flags. Identity theft wasn't a part of our story until it was. I drove to my father's house immediately. We dug through his mail and found, unopened, another envelope from a bank thanking him for opening a checking account he never had. Panic fluttered in my stomach. "Dad, had you given anyone your social security number?" I asked. He shook his head. "I've only told the doctor and the pharmacist. Somewhere, someone had enough of his data to pretend they were him, to open accounts, to try to slowly siphon away the life he had built." It turned out Claire had not only tried to change the will and the deed, she had also misplaced his driver's license after one of their appointments. We can't prove she used it for identity theft, but it was gone, and a photocopy of it had been used to open the fake bank account. We spent days with a fraud specialist. The specialist explained that elderly people are prime targets because their credit is often stable and their daily transactions are few. A thief can slip in small charges and go unnoticed for months. He advised us to freeze my father's credit, to alert the major credit bureaus, to check his social security statements for any unauthorized use. As we made phone call after phone call, I felt the weight of another betrayal, not necessarily from Claire this time, but from a world where someone's identity is just another asset to exploit. We caught it early. The credit was frozen, the fake accounts were closed. The scar, however, remained. It taught me that inheritance isn't just money and property, it's also the digital footprint we leave. Protecting that is as important as guarding the house. If that wasn't enough, 2 months later, I received a letter addressed to the estate of my father, expressing condolences and inviting the executor to contact the life insurance company about a policy payout. The envelope sat heavy in my hands because my father was alive, sitting in his recliner watching a baseball game. Someone had reported him dead. I showed him the letter. He laughed and then got quiet. "Do they know something we don't?" he joked weakly. Claire had not filed any death certificate. This time, the culprit was an unrelated stranger who had tried to scam an insurance company by claiming to be me, the executor, and to collect on a policy my father had never even bought. It was a classic fake death scam. File a false death certificate, hope it doesn't get cross-checked immediately, and collect before anyone notices. Fortunately, the insurance company had flagged the claim because the policy number didn't exist in their system, but someone had still used my father's data to attempt it. I called the Vital Records office. They had no death certificate on file. The insurance company asked me to send proof of life, a notarized statement from his doctor. We complied. Another afternoon spent proving someone was alive. These episodes added layers to the story. They weren't just side plots, they were warnings. They showed how easily personal information can be weaponized, how the same data used to care for an aging parent can be twisted to exploit them. It deepened my distrust and heightened my vigilance, but it also revealed something else. Systems, when they work, can catch fraud. The credit bureaus responded quickly. The insurance company flagged the fake claim. Having structures in place, like my father's meticulous record keeping and my willingness to question every piece of mail, created a network of defense. I also confronted Claire about the missing driver's license. She admitted she'd misplaced it but denied using it. "I swear I didn't open any accounts," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. I believed her because the timeline didn't fit. She was with me during one of the fraudulent account openings. The identity thief turned out to be a nurse's aide at the clinic, arrested months later for stealing seniors' information. That revelation was a shock and a relief. It meant our family drama hadn't spilled into that crime. It also underscored that the world is full of overlapping dangers. Family conflicts, yes, but also strangers who see vulnerable people as profit centers. These twists reminded me that protecting an elder isn't a single task, it's ongoing. The will, the deed, the bank accounts, the credit reports, the phone calls from strangers, it all weaves together. You can win in court and still have to fight at the mailbox. You can forgive your sister and still need to monitor your father's social security statements. Each micro-betrayal or attempted scam becomes another plot point, another lesson. Together, they made my father's story bigger than a will contest. It became a guide on how to guard a life from every angle. Stay safe.